A lot of people consider Survivor Africa as the finale to classic Survivor, and so, where does Survivor Marquesas fall in the long history of Survivor?
39 days, 16 people, 1 Survivor.
Obviously, Survivor Marquesas is still a classic era season in terms of Peridium's breakdown, but a majority of the community breaks this era into two separate sections. The breakdown I'm referring to has the first 3 seasons as the classic era of Survivor, and seasons 4 to 8 being almost like the 2.0 classic era. In a way, I can kind of agree with that mindset, as Survivor Marquesas comes in feeling a little different with a shift in tone from the previous 3 seasons. And I mean, maybe this season was the downfall of Survivor, as it was the last season to utilize the Reebok branding for the buffs and clothes. Okay, I'm joking about that. To be honest, I think this is where Survivor really starts to become what we can come to expect in the modern day, as we're finally back to the beach after not seeing it in Africa and the Outback. And for the first time ever, Survivor isn't trying to outdo themselves of the previous season, as the season isn't as hard as the previous ones. However, the biggest change in Survivor Marquesas shows with the strategic play. Huge improvements are shown here, and it really is the backbone of the entire season. And so, how does Survivor Marquesas hold up 19 years later?
We're on board the fishing trawler Amaryllis, making our way through the very rough waters of the South Pacific. Down below, deep inside the hold of this ship, 16 Americans about to be abandoned in the middle of the Marquesas.
Yo, what's up? Survivor fans across the world, welcome back to Survivor Retrospective, a daily series where we look back at every single season of Survivor, building up to Survivor Season 41, premiering September 22nd. Yeah, that's right, every single day. If you're new to the channel and the series, I recommend checking out the previous videos I have made on Borneo, the Australian Outback, and Africa. I highly recommend it if you like your stories complete, as all these videos kind of build into each other. I'll put a link in the description with a playlist containing all of these videos and all these retrospectives. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest videos every single day, then I recommend subscribing to the channel with the bell turned on so you can get notified when I upload and you don't miss any of the retrospectives. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get into it.
A fire, you have life in this game. When your fire is gone, so are you.
As the title suggests, I believe Survivor Marquesas is an underrated season of Survivor. The definition of underrated simply means not rated or valued high enough. So although this season does have multiple flaws, at the same time I do believe it is underrated. Underrated in the sense that I believe the online Survivor community ranks it far too low. When something is underrated, it just means you think it's not valued as high as it should be. So please don't get it confused, as I think it should not be considered a top tier season, but at the same time, Survivor Marquesas is in fact underrated. With all that in mind, and without skipping to the end of the video and cheating, I want you guys to comment down below what you think I'm going to rank Survivor Marquesas, and I want you to tell me what you would rank the season.
Word.
In a lot of ways, this season is a step backwards from the previous seasons, but in other ways, there are huge improvements that are made, meaning how you feel about the 4th season of Survivor solely depends on what you value most in a season. We'll get into all this more later, but the production team had struggles with the season before it even began. The characters of the season are very top heavy, with some of the most polarizing players the show had ever seen, but other members of the cast are just meh. And of course, the strategy of the season? Oh, the strategy shown in this season was improved drastically from Africa, and was some of the most complex strategy the show had ever seen for the 4th season. Usually I'll only focus on events that happen directly on the island for these retrospectives, but to get a better understanding of the season, it's important to see the bigger picture. Much like Survivor Africa, Survivor Marquesas has to adapt to being produced in a post 9/11 world. Originally the season was going to be different, but had to quickly find a new location, and they landed on the Marquesas. You're probably asking yourself, what's the problem with this? Well, I do agree it's a pretty good location, but the issue is how rushed this made the production team throughout the entire season, and there's a sense of not being fully prepared when they started filming. This can be seen with decisions that have been made throughout the season, such as the bizarre kite flying challenge. Actually, shout out to Once Upon an Island for that information, as I was unaware of that fact before watching his video on Survivor Marquesas a while back.
Despite such a rushed production schedule, they did a good job this season with a few glaring exceptions.
Hopefully you're okay with me showing that clip, and if you're interested in collabing for a future video, please let me know. Anyway, things like the kite flying challenge is awful to watch, and at the same time, I understand that Survivor had to do what they had to do with being so rushed. It did affect my viewing experience, which is one of the main reasons people find the season hard to watch.
We start off every day with the morning show. Sean runs the show. I'm in charge of the food portion.
What's on today's food review, Rob? Well, today we're going to be starting off with blueberry pancakes, bacon, and sausage.
Alright, I'm gonna be honest with you guys for a second, the first couple episodes of the season are not my cup of tea. They weren't bad by any means, but it was so meh. Like, I was bored watching the first couple episodes of the season, and I shouldn't be bored watching Survivor. However, there's a couple saving graces of these episodes that really help you get through them before the action really begins. We spend a majority of the time with the Mariano tribe as they lose 5 challenges in a row, and the little bit of time we spend with Row 2 is enjoyable as we see the downfall of Kathy O'Brien. In fact, it's insane to watch the comeback that Kathy is able to have after the rough start she has, and it's a major reason why she's such a compelling character to watch. But as I said, the majority of the first portion of the game is spent with that losing tribe, and at that camp we're introduced to Vecepia, Sean, and some guy named Rob who might become important later on.
188 days for me. But I leave here with nothing but love for everybody, gratitude and appreciation.
This guy fully made Survivor into a career, with being in 6 seasons, 2 seasons of The Amazing Race, a televised wedding, and he even has his own merch. What are you guys thinking? For a future video, I react to the Boston Rob rulebook? If this video gets 25 likes, I'll make that happen. Anyway, Survivor Marquesas was the introduction to Rob, and in the year 2021, I would argue that other than Jeff Probst himself, Boston Rob is the face of the franchise, and this is where it all began. When the Survivor casting team decided to place Rob on the season, I really don't think they anticipated him playing the way he did. I don't want to get lost talking about the Survivor archetypes, as that's a whole other beast that could take up the entire video, but Rob was truly the beginning of the Godfather archetype.
But these people are smart, they get rid of me right away. It's the smartest thing they could do. But they won't. They never do.
Rob was truly the first player to fill the role of the Godfather in Leading by Fear, and afterwards he became a fairly popular character that Survivor loves to fill. A little fun fact that most people don't realize is that he didn't wear his now famous Boston Red Sox hat during the season, and instead he's seen wearing a New England Patriots hat. Rob really comes into his own as a Survivor player with the blind side of Hunter Ellis, who is basically Survivor's version of Captain America, which I guess means Boston Rob is the villain of Survivor.
It's important for me to have people on my team. They're gonna do what I tell them to do and not know that I'm telling them to do it. It doesn't matter if my team is stronger physically or even stronger mentally, but just that they obey. It's all on how smart these people are. If they realize if they need you, that's what'll keep them loyal, right? Fear, basically. It's a tough principle, but fear keeps people loyal. If they're afraid they have something to lose, then they'll do what they tell you to do. That's straight out of The Godfather.
Around the swap, my view of the season improved, as I didn't feel like I needed to force myself into watching it anymore. This was the beginning of the underdog story for the new Mariano tribe, and would later be known as the Outsiders Alliance. Before the merge, we would lose Sarah, Gabriel, and Gina, and fun fact about Gabriel is that he would later reapply for Survivor. It would make it pretty far through the audition process until the casting producers realized he had already played the game before.
A new tribe will be born under your guidance. You will sleep under the stars on the same pai where rival chiefs would meet 500 years ago to discuss and make decisions.
Before the two tribes officially merged together, there was a summit designed to come out with the new tribe name, flag, and location. And luckily enough for the players watching at home, the players that came together for the summit were Rob and Kathy. This affects how the rest of the game would turn out, as Rob convinces Kathy that the new Row 2 tribe was planning on voting her out first. At the end of the day, it ends up being Rob going home first, as Kathy was able to win immunity.
To tell you the truth, I don't believe John for a second. I think he's like slick, and I have a plan that may work to get rid of John.
And just like that, with Rob voted out as Survivor Marquesas, we were down to the final 9 players left in the game. And anyone that's good with numbers knows that means you need 5 players in order to form a majority. For some reason, the Row 2-4 alliance, consisting of John and 3 other characters who are way too boring to name, thought they controlled the entire game. But the other 5 players were forced to come together as it would be in their best interest to do so, resulting in the Row 2-4 dropping the next 4 tribal councils in a pretty boring way. Even though I think it's boring, you need to give credit to Sean, Pascal, Kathy, Neleh, and Vecepia for coming together in this way, as it would ultimately be the first time in Survivor history where members of both original tribes would make it to the final tribal council, with Neleh and Vecepia. So let's skip ahead to that final 5 where things really start to get interesting again. Kathy became the swing vote between Vecepia and Sean, and Neleh and Pascal. She ends up choosing her original Row 2 tribe, voting Sean out of the game. Throughout the season, Sean was a fan favorite and really should have returned for an all-star season. But I guess we'll continue to keep our fingers crossed for second chance too.
Alpha male too, so I find it hard to just follow somebody just blindly and keep going to somebody like they my daddy. I'm not gonna do that. They better know I'm from Harlem. and I'm representing.
The rock draw moment of the Final Four of Survivor Marquesas was really an insane moment for the season, and game-changing in so many ways. The Final Four tiebreaker would later be changed to a fire-making challenge, but the concept of leaving your entire Survivor game to chance is just insane. I think all the players agree with that, as we wouldn't see the rock draw be implemented again until Survivor Blood vs. Water many years later. Kathy and Vecepia knew they needed to vote together, as Neleh and Pascal would never turn on each other. Ultimately, Pascal ends up drawing the purple rock. Poor Pascal. My man had 0 votes against him for the entire season, but he still was sent home.
Reveal.
I told you it felt purple.
Okay, I need you guys to sit down because I have a hot take coming in 3, 2, 1. Vecepia is a really good Survivor player and deserves way more credit than she gets during this season. She also did whatever was best for her game by constantly flipping on her alliance in order to put herself in the best position she possibly could. She played under the radar, ensuring that she was never a huge threat and no one was really ever gunning to get her out. She was also playing a highly strategic game, especially by Season 4 standards, as she was making moves throughout the entire game. Vecepia needs to come back and play Survivor again. Sadly, I don't think that'll ever happen. Winners at War was truly the best opportunity for this, and with that season ending, I don't see them going back to the well of old school winners that they didn't choose to play Season 40. I really think this is just worst case scenario for Vecepia, as she got buried in the edit for a large portion of the season. But unlike other players who got buried in the edit, Vecepia was making moves, so it's just a result of being in a season with larger than life personalities that are kind of screen hogs. I think a really interesting story could have been told if Vecepia was at the forefront for the entire season. However, the editing team decided to go another way with that. All of us viewers need to remember, we see a highly edited TV show, whereas the game could have played out slightly differently. The edit is not always the reality.
The winner of Survivor Marquesas.
I really don't like how bitter the jury was, but that's just the course of backstabbing during an old school Survivor game. I much prefer when the juries respect the game of the finalists who played hard and who are not bitter about being betrayed, but we won't see that in a jury for a long time. All in all, this is a decent season of Survivor, and I'm conflicted on what the final rating should be. I spent most of this retrospective trying to be positive with the season and highlight the parts I enjoyed the most, and I did that because there's a lot of parts of the season that I really do like, and there's a lot of fun to be had. We are introduced to the Rob father and a couple other top tier Survivor characters, and for the first time ever, we have the rock draw at the Final Four, and this season has a great underdog story. But at the same time, I feel like I'm actively trying to look for the good in the season, because when I objectively look at the season, there's so many flaws with it. The winner is very complex and not easily understood by the edit we are given. The production quality was not up to par with what was seen in previous seasons, and the majority of the cast is filled with boring characters who you aren't shown to care about. In conclusion, I think this is a season that really hasn't aged as well as I would have hoped going into it. That isn't to say it's bad, however. In fact, I strongly believe that Survivor Marquesas is an underrated season of Survivor. It has many flaws, and I still believe it's one of the weaker classic era seasons, but the larger Survivor community tends to rate the season as being downright awful, and I need to disagree with the people that think that. And so all in all, I do like the season, and there are tons of really fun moments to be had. However, it's not a true classic like the first 3 seasons we have covered, and despite my criticism, I still think it's underrated. With all that said, my final rating for Survivor Marquesas is a 6.0 out of 10. C tier.